Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. If you want to be more productive, just work harder and do more. Isn't that what we're often told or tell ourselves? Well, what if the opposite of all of that is the real answer to better productivity? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. As a productivity expert and author on the topic, Donna McGeorge has heard all the theories about output. But what she's realised is that often we need to slow down and prioritise only what needs to be done. She's identified 3 main productivity myths, which she outlines in a moment. First, though, what exactly is meant by productivity? Donna McGeorge explains to Chris Ashmore.
Productivity to me isn't just around work. It's around, I know I'm leading a productive life if I'm doing the things that fill me with joy, I'm connecting with the people, things and activities that are getting me the results that I want. And of course, if I have a job, I'm doing what's expected of me in return for the pay that I'm getting. So I think it can be quite individual, but we all know the feeling. And I mean, it's a great question, but it is a question for your listeners to ask themselves. How do they know at the end of the day they've had a productive day? What does it look like? Now, for me, it looks like I've done a bunch of webinars. I've had a couple of podcast recordings with peeps like you. I've done some proposals and I'm keeping my business afloat. But I end the day in good enough shape that I can have some meaningful conversations with my husband at the end of the day, rather than telling him to talk to the hand because I'm too tired or too exhausted. So I think it is around balance, and I do think it's quite individual.
Now, you have some myths you want to bust when it comes to productivity. The first one I understand is hard work will get you ahead. But what's wrong with that?
Well, I know there'll be lots of people that say, well, doesn't it? Working hard. But I'm going to say, gee, there's plenty of people out there who are working really, really hard and not feeling like they're getting ahead. So I hate to kind of cliche this up a little bit, but it is around working smarter. And one of the things we know is that the Pareto principle says that 20% of your tasks are going to get you about 80% of your results. So in fact, if you just put your energy in identifying what those 20% are, then you're probably going to work smarter, not harder. So that the 80% is working hard, the 20% is working smart. And for me, it's an old-fashioned work ethic, this notion that we had to work hard, and I just don't think we need to. And I also think that if we're not creating buffers in, space to recharge our batteries, to recuperate, no matter how hard we work, we still may not end up being as productive as we'd like to be. Well,
the second myth you say is be more productive.
Yes, it's the word more. Like, I really have a problem with the word more because we've got a limited amount of time for what we can do, a limited amount of capacity. And if you think about your wardrobe, you can only fit so much into it before you either need a new wardrobe, like an extra wardrobe, or you're going to take stuff out. So for me, it's around focusing on doing less. So lots of people talk about their to-do lists. I'm like, have you got a not to-do list? What are the things you're not going to do today that's going to make your day that much better? And so for me, it's things like I have whole days where I just ignore social media, like a couple of days, I'll just ignore social media. So I'm not going to do social media today. And I know that creates more time for me for other things, because I just think too often when it comes to solving a problem, we think more rather than less. Even, deciding I'm going to declutter my house, the first thing we do is go out to IKEA and buy a bunch of boxes and bring them in. So we're bringing more in order to take stuff out. It's kind of bizarre. So I'm rather into this idea of, rather than thinking I need to add an extra hour to my day to get more done, I'm like, why not just do less? There's 2 or 3 things in your day. I reckon sometimes there's 2 or 3 things in your day. If you didn't do it, no one would even notice. No one would even notice. Just don't do it.
Yes. Well, the third productivity myth you say revolves around the old urgent and important strategy that we all hear about.
Well, we all hear about it because it came from the global best-selling book by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so it's been around since the 80s. And if we just want to pause for a minute and think about that, that's 40 years ago. So are there other ways we can think about it? And what we do know now around, things like advances in neuroscience and how our brains work, that we know that we're geared for more intense work or stuff that requires mental alertness in the morning, and we can do more routine things in the afternoon. So I like us to think about intensity and impact. How much brain power does it need? And how important is it? I'm still with importance. How much impact? Am I going to get a good return on my energetic investment? So I like to see, rather than thinking of things of urgent and important, I think, how much brain power does this need? And if it needs a lot, for many of us, best time to do that is in the morning. And so we just think differently about how we carve up our to-do list.
What's the answer then? How do we become more productive without falling into those traps that we've just been talking about? Is there an answer?
I think, there's probably not a single answer, but I know for me, when I'm feeling like I might be a bit under the pump, a bit overwhelmed, a bit out of control, the first thing I do is stop, take a few deep breaths and ask myself, what do I need to do next? And that usually busts me out of that feeling like I've got too much going on in my head. I pay close attention to the clock in my body rather than the one on the wall. So I think, when is the best time for me to do these things? Because I do think sometimes we think I've got to cram all this stuff before 5, whereas sometimes it'll take you less if you wait till the next morning when you're fresher. And so I reckon it's about conscious choices rather than operating on 40-year-old default settings. So being really conscious about how you're using your time and where you're spending it and what you're putting your attention on.
Are there any companies that you're aware of that have managed to take a more modern approach to productivity?
Absolutely. I'm working with a few of them. One in particular, they were trying to reduce the amount of time their customers are interacting, the time it takes from a customer from the moment they approach to the sale going ahead or the transaction being completed. And they're trying to reduce the time. And they've done everything from trying to streamline processes and different forms and all of that. And none of it's really worked very well. So I said, how about we start by shifting your people's perspective on time? So we started out by working with individuals around how they view time, around how they think about their capacity, around what more means to them, what time and productivity means to them. And we've made quite a big difference. We've managed to shave, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but seconds and minutes of the time for their client interactions just by getting people to think differently about how they approach their personal time and capacity.
That was speaker and author Donna McGeorge. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.